It's time we talk about my child's disability. And for those of you who follow me because of the remote learning post that I made, this is the story time explaining it. So back when my son was a baby, he was a warm baby. Like, his skin was warm. Like, he was always warm to the point he got a lot of baths because he was sweaty all the time as a baby. His pediatrician wasn't worried about this, so neither was I. When he was in preschool, he had a lot of difficulty. Like, he was a very agitated kid, and some days he wouldn't do anything at all, and other days he would fully participate. He went to a private preschool, and the teacher he had kind of shifted her day around to accommodate wherever he was. And then he got into kindergarten. Kindergarten was a living nightmare. Now, at this point, for the last 2.5 years, he had been having insane tantrums, hours long. The kindergarten that he started at did everything except for help him, up to and including trying to suspend him over the fact that he was upset. Come back for part 2. Remote learning and my child's disabilities, story time, part 2. So we took my son to a psychologist who agreed that he was going through a lot. Despite everything that I said, both the school and the psychologist agreed that he had ADHD. So that's where we started at. I was not entirely convinced because there were some things that just didn't make sense with ADHD. Fast forward 2 years. In a different school, he's now made a whole bunch of ideations and threats and things for suicide and hurting other people. And at this point, he has a handful of psychological evaluations to make sure he's safe and other people are safe around him. I cannot even begin to describe how difficult it is to find a psychiatrist who's willing to work with a 7-year-old. I finally find one, and she quickly goes, "Oh my God, this child has bipolar. He's hallucinating." No shit. So we start him on medication, and the hallucinations go away for a while. At this point, he is in 2nd grade. His behaviors aren't any better, but he's not hallucinating. He now also has an IEP. Come back for part 3. Welcome back to part 3 of Storytime about remote learning and my child's disabilities. So at this point, he's entering 3rd grade. He's in another school. He's now 8 years old, and he has spent the last 5 years of his life having these insane rage episodes that can last anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 or 3 days. He screams, he yells, he bites, he hits, he hurts himself, he hurts other people. It is violent and uncontrollable. We've now added on anxiety to his ADHD and bipolar 1 diagnoses. At this point, we've kind of gone through the ringer of things. Picking him up early most days because he lost his mind during school. So many psych evaluations. CPS being called while he's actively hallucinating. We've had 6 therapists. 2 psychiatrists. CPS called shortly after he came out of the hospital because he was manic and the new medications hadn't started working yet. And then fucking COVID happened. Enter remote learning. Imagine being fresh out of the hospital from a suicide attempt to do remote learning. Come back for part 4. Part 4 of remote learning and my son's disabilities. So now we're into the era of COVID, and it sucks because we literally don't know what we're doing. Nobody's ever navigated this before. At this point, I am completely exhausted by the number of IEP meetings that I've had to ensure that he actually has his needs met. I can't tell you how hard it was just to be able to get him a 1-to-1. The remainder of the school year was absolutely devastating. We couldn't look away from him for even a moment because he was constantly on the cusp of needing to be rehospitalized because of the stress from remote learning. This is something that we communicated to the school regularly. It was such a problem that when we had an IEP meeting over the summer as he transitioned into 4th grade, they didn't want to make a plan for remote learning because they were just so confident that this whole pandemic would be done. Yeah, that's not how that worked out. So when they went remote again, I kept saying, this isn't working. I had several meetings about it. Meanwhile, I'm still sure we're missing something about his diagnoses. Come back for part 5. Storytime, part 5 about my child's disabilities and remote learning. As I'm sure you've been able to guess by the beautiful background singing, I have another child, which is just one more layer of complication when it comes to remote learning. I have another child. I also have a job. I can't spend 6 hours a day locked in on my child. And then the insane amount of hours afterwards trying to reteach him everything that he wasn't able to absorb because he was freaking out for those 6 hours. Also, I hate new math. It doesn't make any sense. I spent most of the fall and the winter in meetings with the school about the fact that this was not appropriate for his need level and that he was on the cusp of being hospitalized every single day. Then in January, when he lost his pencil and he couldn't figure out where it was, he had a huge meltdown, punched me in the face, and then he was hospitalized. Leading up to that, they called truancy because he was refusing to participate because it stressed him out too much. He came out of the hospital in February, Come back for part 6. Back to part 6 of story time about my son's disabilities and remote learning. Not wanting to repeat what happened last year when CPS was called because he was hallucinating in school again, we decided to have an IEP meeting to help him transition back into school. We had a meeting, we had accommodations set up, and everything seemed okay. One of the side effects to his medication is congestion. He was sent home for 2 weeks to quarantine and remote learn because of the congestion. And they had the audacity to ask me when he would get a COVID test that he didn't qualify for. During this time, he was on the cusp of falling apart constantly every single day again because remote learning is not appropriate for him. Also during this time, I discovered bipolar thermoregulatory fear of harm. And his symptoms match perfectly. So we have another meeting, and at this point, I'd been asking that he have accommodations made. They have material work since October. But that's not what the other kids are doing. Come back for part 7. Welcome back to Storytime part 7 about my child's disabilities and remote learning. So we're in a meeting because remote learning doesn't work, and I've had enough. The company that my son gets his therapy through, 2 therapists, he has a case manager, and the case manager has a supervisor, obviously, and they both sat in on this meeting. This is the meeting leading up to the incident that happened. So in this meeting, we said, enough is enough. No more remote learning. We're not doing this because it'll put him in the hospital again. We're done. Maybe we can behaviorally train him to be able to do remote learning. No, we're not doing remote learning at all. We're going to have another accommodation made. Actually, we do accommodations for a lot of students where they have the physical work and then they just turn it in. See? That's what we want. Let's do that. Yes, I think this would be a good idea for him because he has a mood disorder, not a behavioral problem. Can't we just behaviorally train him? No, we're not doing remote learning anymore. I do not give permission for it. Yeah, okay. Cool, we're going to do the alternative. Come back for part 8. Storytime, part 8 of my child's disabilities and remote learning. So during this meeting, we went over a whole lot of stuff, including the bipolar fear of harm, because it was something I had already contacted the researcher about, and this is something that we're pursuing. Again, this is like a really expensive treatment, so if you could help, please, I would really appreciate it. Thank you. Ultimately, we did agree. Remote learning does not work for him. We're not doing it anymore. Period. Full stop. Fast forward a week, and my son has an interesting story to tell me. How was your day at school today? It was pretty good, but there was this one weird thing that happened. What do you mean weird thing? What happened? Well, I was taken out of class and I went to this empty classroom and I was told we were going to practice remote learning. It was really strange because there was nobody else there. And I had to check in on my regular classroom on Zoom, which was really weird. But you know what? At the end of the hour, they gave me this really cool crystal and told me to keep it a secret and not tell you. Well, I shouldn't have told you that. I'm sorry, what? So I did what any outraged person would do at 9 o'clock at night. I posted it on social media. Come back for part 9. Back to part 9 of Storytime about my son's disabilities and remote learning. The next morning after I drop him off at school, I get home and I get a phone call. Hi, yes, I understand that you're really upset about something that happened in school yesterday. And it's not that we had any bad intentions or anything. We were just trying to help. Uh-huh. So why was he pulled out of his regular classroom to do something that I did not have consent for or knowledge about and told to keep it a secret? It was in his best interest. Really? We don't want to have a bad situation or a bad relationship with you. We just want to do what's right for him, right? Yeah, so why was he put in a restrictive environment to do a thing that I revoked consent for and was told to keep it a secret? It was not a malicious intent or meant to really be a secret. Uh-huh. Really? Yeah, we just weren't going to tell you because we didn't think we needed to. Really? I'm back for part 10. Part 10 of Storytime about my child's disabilities and remote learning. What was really important about that phone call is the fact that I hadn't reached out to the school at all. That's right, they called me because they saw the post on social media. Also, the person who pulled him out of class was not the one who called me. In fact, I haven't heard from that person directly at all. But wait, there's more! Hello, yes, this is the Vice Superintendent, and with me is the head of the Special Education Department who confirms that he was at the last meeting you had. Really? Yes, we understand that you're really upset about something that happened, and we want to try to make that right. Do you? Absolutely. I really don't believe that anybody in my staff had any ill intentions. Really? Then you're about to find the next 45 minutes very enlightening and very interesting. Oh my God, what? So what accommodations are you going to provide? I am so sorry all of that happened to you, and we're going to accommodate all of his needs. Yeah, that's what I thought. I'm just waiting to see what happens next. And so are they, because I have a feeling they're scared of me now.